Hi, everybody. Welcome back to an ASIS TV, Security Guy Radio TV Blackhat Preview. Mr. Stefan Carudi. He's with Cybel Angel. That's CYBELANGEL.com. A startup out of France, and we're connecting you from France right now. Very excited to have you on the show, Stefan.
Very nice to meet you.
Now, I always like to have startups and talk about startups because, boy, it takes a lot to do something like this. Tell us what you guys do.
We scan the whole internet, every possible IP address on the planet. So we scan every connected object on the internet. Oh. And some of them are just misconfigured or using just the default settings that are completely open, because we can see it is a new trend with the software vendors that pretty often they sell their software without any security. It's your business to secure the software. You can see, for example, with a database like MongoDB or with a Redis, by default, everything is open. It's not their business to secure the database. Their business is just making a great database. And with this trend, we see more and more connected servers, connected devices that are by default open. And it also goes with the trend that Internet of Things is trying to release more and more connected objects to the general public. And if you want to sell your device, it must be simple to use. And the security usually makes it more difficult to use. So very often they prefer to just leave it open and think that nobody will ever find it. But the problem is that the internet is not as big as we think it is. And quite a lot of people nowadays are scanning the internet, and some are ill-intentioned. You can think about some governments on the planet that could find this information and use it for favoring their industries, for example, or for just espionage. And our job is to scan the internet as fast as possible, be the first on the data leak, and be the first to bring this incident to our customers so that they can remedy with this data leak before someone ill-intentioned finds it. We were surprised at the beginning that we bring everyday data leaks that we find on the internet to our clients. And at the beginning, we thought that we were shooting ourselves in the foot, because by bringing data leaks and having our customers close the data leaks, we would not find anything after a couple of weeks, and we would not have any new incidents, so we would run out of business. But no, the statistics show that every month we find more and more data leaks on the internet. It's because hardware vendor, software vendor sell much faster than we are able to find the data leaks and have them closed. We developed a robot to automatically find and retrieve this stolen and leaked information that was leaked by the hackers back then. But then the internet changed a little bit. You know, the anonymous and lolsec are starting to be less effective, and we started to discover new data leak sources. The internet is very wide, and when we think about the internet, most of the people think about the web, what is accessible through a web browser. But that's just a tiny portion of the internet. You have a lot of different layers or a lot of different protocols, and we started by scanning the whole IPv4 range for open FTP servers that allowed anonymous connections, and we were struck by an enormous amount of data that was publicly open. We did not need any password or login or nothing, just anonymous connection. You just connect, you get all the information you want. And we started to automatize this process with a large-scale scanner, and to scan a lot of different protocols. And this way, we are now gathering a lot of information. We gather more than 1 billion documents, new documents every single day. And it's global because, you know, the internet is global, and it's also cross-industry because it concerns every possible company on the planet. So we started with the web. Of course, we do clear web or gray web with paste sites like Pastebin, for example. We do dark web with Tor forums. But we realized, that came from our expertise 3 years ago, we realized that the most critical data that is leaking on internet does not come from the web. Actually, it comes from other protocols, being FTP, SMB, rsync, and all these kind of protocols that are designed to share documents. So this is really our strength, where we have developed a proprietary large-scale scanner to gather automatically this data, and we also have automated the data analysis. It starts with common keywords belonging to our companies, to our clients that are large companies. And then we have also artificial intelligence with machine learning to narrow the funnel of documents and really extract the most sensitive documents that we can find on the internet. That way, we are able to find one critical server leaking documents every single day for our clients. So on average, our clients get between around 30 alerts every month, with a couple of them that are very, very damaging. If you remember last year, the US Air Force suffered a major data leak with a lieutenant that had gathered information, documents, sensitive documents, confidential documents on his personal hard drive. It was a NAS drive. He was keeping this information at home, and the server was completely open. He did not know that. It was just a negligence. And the security researcher was able to find these documents, and there was critical information with thousands of US officers at risk, with personal identifiable information. There was some open investigation regarding sexual harassment and a lot of sensitive topics like that, and also login and passwords to access the US Air Force intranet. And it is interesting to see that just from a negligence can come a national security threat. And this is exactly the kind of data leak that we find every single day for all our clients. We are the only company that does all this scope: dark web, deep web, and connected devices. And we are the only company that does it at this scale and at this pace. You can find other companies that do dark web, for example. You can find Shodan that does some connected devices as well, although we go much deeper into this kind of scan. So you can find some companies that does a little bit of this and that, but we are the only company doing all that at this scale. And it was interesting what you said about Google and Yahoo. They are more concerned about protecting the end users, and the end users are just consumers. But now that the cloud business is taking a bigger importance in Google's and Amazon's business, they are starting to develop products that tend to resemble what we do, but to protect their own customers. So they have some products to protect their Google Cloud Storage or Amazon S3, because we have seen recently some major data leaks coming from these kind of data sources. So yes, they want to do it, but to protect their own customers. And we want to do it to protect the whole world and every possible company on the planet. And hopefully, in the end, we'll be able to protect consumers as well.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Blackhat Preview. John Shear of Sophos.com, SOPHOS for my podcast listeners. They'll be at booth 1251 at Blackhat. I'm really excited about this. I interviewed John last year. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back.
Now, you got a lot of stuff going on at your booth. You have a lot of, big lecturers and speakers there talking about the deep neural networks and the speed of the Red Queen and machine learning and PDF malware. And my head's going to explode with all that. But what are you going to speak about? You got something interesting to talk to us about today.
Yeah, let me plug my colleagues first. As you mentioned, some of the deep learning folks, the data scientists that are actually the ones that develop our models for the machine learning engine are going to be talking about what they're doing, the kinds of things that they're seeing, and the kinds of techniques that they're using to detect malware. So, these are the really intelligent folks and that you should come by and listen to. We're also going to have some other people just talking about the threat landscape and malware in general. I'll be doing a small talk on cryptojacking and just seeing what that scene is like right now. And we're also releasing a report on the SamSam ransomware gang that one of our colleagues is going to be doing a live talk about it. But we also have this report, like I said, which was just released today, July 31st. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think what we're seeing with the commoditization of ransomware as it's existed for the last 4 or 5 years or so, there's been this sort of dilution of profits, if you will, when it comes to ransomware. So many more people have been able to get into the game. You still have the big players, the ones that are actually making the money in terms of the massive scale that they have. But then you've got all these other Me Too players that get a kit off the dark web, for example, for a couple $100 or even $20. You get these ransomware as a service portals that pop up. So really, with very little technical ability, people can start getting into this ransomware game. And what's interesting is that with the SamSam gang, they've kind of gone back to the old school methods of breaching a company. They are actually doing reconnaissance on their targets. They are breaching the company. Once inside the company, they do additional reconnaissance to see, hey, what kind of company are we in? They have seemed to focus a little bit on the government and health sector. But once they're in there, they figure out, okay, how many machines do we have here? They use traditional tools that you might have in your environment, like PSExec, the sysinternals tool. They use some off-the-shelf, pen testing, hacking tools like Mimikatz, do some credential harvesting. And then they deploy their malware, and all of a sudden, all at once, while you're sleeping, they'll just hit the go button and everything encrypts. And then they charge, instead of the $300 to $600 per machine, they'll charge you like $50,000 for the whole shot. So it's kind of a throwback, as you can see, from the old days of more manual, more deliberate, and just a much harder to detect adversary.
Now, I remember when this kind of started, there were the two players, like you mentioned. There's the state players, for lack of a better term, big giant criminal enterprises, and then the small guy. And what I read recently was that the big operations people don't like these little one-time player guys going and getting $1,000 here. He thinks it gives them a bad name, a bad reputation to their criminal syndicate. Is that still going on? Or are these big guys trying to get rid of these? To your point, I guess the little guys are still here and doing a new approach and becoming bigger players.
In much the same way as a lot of the other malware out there, this is still a very opportunistic crime. The big guys, the ones that are very confident in their ability to distribute and deploy and have people click on their malware and actually get lured by whatever it is that they're using. A lot of times it's just going to be an attachment in an email that contains maybe a malicious macro. And then you've got the smaller guys, as you said, who are just kind of nipping at the ankles. But the problem with the smaller guys that we've seen is a lot of them have abused the trust relationship, if we can use that term, between the criminal and the victim. So they're not playing fair. In the old days, and by the old days, I mean, the beginning days of ransomware with CryptoLocker, CryptoWall, and some of the bigger ones out there like Locky as well, you were guaranteed to get that key back if you paid. And that was the trust relationship that you could count on with these bigger players that have made all this money. And as the smaller players got involved, a lot of people just kind of did it for kicks. There were scammers out there that just wanted to get some money. There were people that didn't know what they were doing. And by virtue of that, they couldn't give you back the key just because they didn't know how. They didn't know how to use the kit, or simply they tried to code their own encryption algorithms, for example, which didn't work. So there were all these other factors, these externalities to these other guys coming in, that led to this sort of bifurcation between what we would call the professional, trustworthy ransomware criminals and the wannabe amateurs.
It's very, very interesting because, my background is law enforcement, and what you say rings completely true. There was the cops and robbers creed back in the day in the 80s, and good guys and bad guys functioned a certain way, and there's certain things you didn't do on either side, right? That's all kind of out the window. And this is a whole new world now with this kind of stuff. What do you think the best defense for the average person is? What I do is I just back everything up. And I had a guy try to hack me and do that thing about a year ago, and I said, piss off. And I just reformatted my hard drive and put everything back. I didn't worry about him taking my data because it wasn't anything that important. But what can the average person do now?
Well, backing up is a very good first step, and the follow-on step to backing up is making sure that those backups are no longer accessible by your primary systems, because most competent ransomware today will look for things like backups. They'll look for connected drives, even cloud connected drives. So if your backup is simply going to a cloud folder, for example, that's always syncing, that's going to get that's going to get encrypted as well. So you want to get those backups disconnected from your main network, your primary operating systems, and then you want to test them, because there's nothing worse than having that backup, feeling confident like you've got a backup, and then if something does happen and you try to restore your information and it's corrupted, that can be a bad day, and then you may be forced to actually pay the criminals the ransom. So the backup is your get out of jail free card, but make sure that you're doing backups right.
Now, I was speaking to somebody a couple of days ago, and they were talking about a new direction the internet's going. Where, everything's connected, that's fantastic, but it's also not fantastic, right? And they're talking about doing something called lakes. Is that the proper term? So, the entire United States defense system shouldn't be on the internet. They should have their own separate system, which you could hack to specifically if you went to it, but at least it's not connected to some guy in Saudi Arabia where you can get into it, right? You have to do more work. I'm not sure if I'm phrasing that term correctly, but have you heard about this?
I'm not familiar with the term specifically, but what you're speaking of just brings to mind this whole concept of segregation of networks and principles of least privileges, and just simply doing the security basics right when it comes to connecting systems on the internet. You want your higher value targets, the ones that if breached would cause either disaster from a business perspective or even a law enforcement or national security perspective. You want to get those as far away from the internet as possible. There's the concept of air gaps that we hear about a lot of times, but I recently heard a really good quote about air gaps, which is they're like unicorns. Everybody's talking about them, but nobody's ever seen one. And so with air gaps, you really have to use air gap discipline, which is you don't connect to the air gap with the same system that you connect to the regular internet to. And that's how most of these air gaps get breached. And when I say most, I think it's close to 100% of the time air gaps are getting compromised, or the systems on the air gap side are getting compromised by somebody bringing in a dirty system from the internet side. And so by being able to segregate your different network segments and applying appropriate ACLs, access control lists, or firewall rules, whatever you want to call them, between these different segments, then you're approaching a situation that is going to provide you with a much better opportunity to withstand an attack from the internet, and even withstand an attack from somebody who might already be in your network.
Mr. John Scheer, sophos.com, sophos.com, at booth 1251. That's a Blackhat. Join us for the live show there with ASIS TV. John, thanks for coming on the show. Very, very fascinating information. And stop by the press room if you're around. Maybe we can have another chat.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on Security Guy TV and SecurityGuyRadio.com.